Welcome to another edition of the Civ Battle Royale. My name is Dawkinzz, and let's get right into part 105, Rump Steak Rare. Hello everyone, welcome to this week's exciting edition of the Civ Battle Royale. I'm user Daxington, and I'll be your humble shepherd through part 105 of this bloodbath. To get my biases out of the way, I really only follow this game to scan the high seas, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mythical Canadian battleship. But for the purposes of this narration, I suppose I'll have to drop in on what's happening with the rest of the world occasionally, so I can keep the non-Canadian battleship nerds interested. In this week's original content feature, we catch up with one of the cliffhangers from last week, the fate of Exclavia. Coming from Kekadin, though, this may be less John Hughes and more Coen brothers. A cry of angst after a life that has been on a severe downward slope after extremely poor decisions. To absolutely no one's surprise, Pedro continues to dance the top tango in this week's power rankings. Even when the Boers were on their epic tear at the top, they almost always had at least some deviation to their score. But Brazil has had a big old goose egg in that spot for the past 3 parts. This is a level of dominance that we definitely haven't seen anywhere else in CBR history. And it's not hard to see why here on the tile-accurate map from Der Erlingkönig. For the last 2 parts, we've seen radical changes to the map in India, the Middle East, and now Central and Eastern Europe. And by radical changes, I mean rapid lime greenification. All other civs appear to be standing still and watching the spectacle in awe, like they're on some kind of Antarctic submarine and not in an existential struggle for existence. Or something like that. On the tile-accurate-ish city and puppet map from Spherical Melon, we see the next thing to be feared from Brazil. What happens when he starts unpuppeting his gains in the new, from his perspective, world? But here on the CBR, we're mostly concerned with the short term. What's going to happen on the next turn? How far will Brazil go in their conquest of Sweden? And how long will it take? And to everyone's disappointment, it appears that Pedro has grown tired of his intercontinental samba, deciding to opt for the 2nd time in a row to end his blitzkrieg with a Blitzfrieden. The timing is awfully suspicious, with the armistice being signed just shortly after plunging power ranking of Sweden. Battleship Weekly's investigative journalists are reportedly looking into suspicious buy-ups of Swedish stock among PR and BC users that could suggest insider trading. Watch out, Martha Stewart. But we don't have time for that. Other things are happening on the slide. As expected, the Koreans are fruitlessly experimenting with technology that will allow them to take a city without a melee unit. Failure is a part of science, after all, and they are failing all over the Hawaiian megalopolis of Kanaohe. Keep at it, Korea. I'm sure the next missile will be able to enforce an orderly regime change. Things are also looking worse for Kamehameha as a Mr. Harry Parks, am I missing an inside joke, is joining the coalition of the hype train against Hawaii. I've never heard of Harry, but I wish him luck against an enemy so powerful that even 15 Korean aircraft carriers are proving downright useless. And in the final news in this pack slide, the Kimberly and the Buccaneers make peace in a clear effort to focus as much energy as possible on the 2nd most dangerous rump state on the cylinder. We get our first look at a post-Carnival Eastern Europe. Sweden's forces have, of course, been concentrated into their territory because of the peace deal, but it seems clear that Pedro was in this war for the easy land grab and didn't want to get bogged down in a protracted quagmire. The only pickup here is Linköping. What's the matter, Pedro? Why can't you seem to finish any of the wars you start? A shot of formerly Icelandic Germany shows Malmö and Krakow also changed administrations. Rumor has it that this deal was brokered exclusively to reduce border gore in war-torn areas like Central Europe. The gap in city health between the former combatants and the total lack of a local Brazilian air force may show why this treaty was relatively kind to the Swedish Lion. But you know what I think? I think you could sell a very expensive undercoating and tow package to Pedro when all he wanted was a beater to pick up groceries and drop off the kids. To round out our tour of former Sweden, we confirm that no late war city flips occurred in Anatolia. One is left to wonder if the reason Pedro invaded Sweden was entirely because of Gustavus's Hebron detachment getting in the way of Pedro's dance down to the Middle East. If so, this might be the single largest loss of life due to queuing incidents. But I think it's because Sweden didn't join in against the Boers. They weren't a good ally, and they paid the price. Batacaloa, more like battered Kaloa, am I right? Is this thing on? Here we catch up to Exclavia on its last legs with Batacaloa in the red. The Afghan refugees protected 4 of the 5 avenues of assault and also dissuaded a nuclear end to Kekkonen's reign. But despite all of that help from the Afghan Finns, the glorified Six Flags guy appears to have fallen victim to one of the classic blunders, the most famous of which is never sign an open borders agreement with Pedro, but only slightly less well known is this: never leave the only tile you can be killed from open to a giant ED-209 ripoff. We've briefly entered an episode of Mr. Robot where the camera is pointing at nothing in particular while all the action happens at the periphery of the screen. In the top right corner we see that the last exclave has indeed fallen. Don't worry, Kek mourners, I'll get back to this, but for now, there's diplomatic fallout to cover. Finland appears to have been much more popular in death than in life, with Vietnam and Brazil immediately declaring war on the Kimberley for their heinous crimes against both sad, bald Norsemen and descendants of Central Asian refugees. In other news for fans of peace and cooperation, it appears that OCP 2.0 has finally come to a complete close with the cessation of the mostly toothless hostilities between the Boers and Vietnam. Sure, there was some city flipping before the big green machine got in the way, and there were potentially some nuclear incidents in the South Indian Ocean, but for the most part this was the least interesting conflict in the OCP2, and I'd frankly thought it was over last part. And finally, the coalition against Hawaii has grown to 6 allies. To have warranted this kind of action, the Orange Menace must have an ideology so dangerous that it must be stopped at all costs. Clearly, this is OCP 3.0. The question is, will this be enough to contain Kamehameha? The first shots have already been fired in the war to avenge Kekkonen. Cities on both sides have taken damage, but there were no first-turn captures. While Vietnam is clearly the favorite in terms of power ranking and production, the Trungs have never succeeded in gaining significant territory in the oceanic region after many, many attempts. Can they turn that reputation around? Jandamara has the initial upper hand in this arm wrestling match, with opportunities to take both Amarvati via his apparent giant death robot bias, as well as a paratrooper landing outside Thai Li Bi Nai. If those two fall, it would strike a significant blow to the Trung Air Force in the region. This seems to be an uncharacteristic war for Pedro, as he has a carpet neither inside nor directly outside of Kimberley territory. Either he's just in it for sniping 1 or 2 cities, or perhaps he was closer to Kekkonen than we all knew. Has anyone actually seen Pedro lately? Is he okay? Does he know he still has friends? Anyway, we also get a better look at the rest of Malay Peninsula, which paints a harder picture for Jandamara. It's full of Trung troops, and their air force extends much further back. If the Kimmies make headway, it'll likely be temporary. We finally get our first look at the long-anticipated OCP 3.0. Everyone's been afraid of the Orange Menace for so long that it's finally time to bring him down a peg. Let's meet the newcomers to the coalition. Iceland, of course, couldn't miss out on any OCP. Engelfert is like the guy from Brooklyn in a World War II movie. He's never the main character, but he's always fun and probably won't make it to the end. The Blackfoot are clearly out to reboot their dreams of a South Pacific beachhead. Good luck, Crowfoot. If you succeed, I hope you don't immediately lose everything to Vietnam. He's also brought a lot of melee units to this fight. The captain of the nearby Korean submarine is a skeptical one of the tactic. Sejong declared that missiles are the clear path to victory, so why aren't they working? The Kimberley, of course, joined the coalition in a transparent attempt to gain popularity after taking down Mr. Clean. This is not a Tide ad. This is not a joke that will age well or is good now, even. Nice try, Jandy, but killing 2 rump states doesn't make it a right. As promised, we see the final outcome of the last exclave. Finland was one of the most exciting nations of the mid-game. Kekkonen had some early success in fairly traditional wars, like his conquest of the USSR, but he's most famous for pioneering the strategy of paratrooping large groups of units across the continent, which remains one of the greatest tactics on the cylinder still used today. However, he never used his tactic to gain significant territory outside his own. Eventually, his paratroopers fell out of date, and as they died, he didn't replace them, opting for a peaceful strategy of turning the other cheek. Unfortunately, that kind of idea doesn't work well in coliseums when lions are around. F. The newly installed mayor of Batacaloa sits down for her lunch. Her first act has been to deport everyone living in the suburbs of the city when they'd protested the toppling of Kekkonen's statues. She was looking forward to some Eggs Benedict when a colonel sat down opposite her without introduction.
They're here.
Who?
The Carnival. Well, surely they can't take the city. It's a fortress. We were the first to take the city since time immemorial, because we had goddamn robots. No one can take it now that we're here.
But the look on the colonel's face said it all, to the mayor's horror. It was the Afghani finish that had made Batacaloa special all along. An Exclavian artist watched his home from afar, composing new songs to be added to the Kalevala, the Kekkonen cycle, a tragedy for both the hero and the villain. Sailing out of the Arabian Sea and into international waters is a unit of Afghani Finnish soldiers. They're homeless for the first time in millennia. They can't go home, and they can't go to the homes of their ancestors. What will they do? One of them says quietly that he's heard tell that these same waters were sailed by a group of Ashanti pikemen who were searching for a paradise where all homeless units could live in peace. His eyes gleamed behind his thick glasses.
Let's go drop into a piece of paradise.
A Buccaneer cyber sub is investigating one of the most curious features of the cylinder, a ring of mountains surrounded by ice. Legends and crackpots on the internet have it that the world is not in fact a cylinder, and that if you could penetrate these mountains and see what's inside, you would find that the world is not a cylinder, but is in fact a series of flat images that are scrolled through to simulate time. Has Henry Morgan been going too deep down a YouTube rabbit hole? Will he nuke the mountains in a desperate attempt to discover that his reality as a mid-tier civ on a cylinder that's rapidly turning green is a sham? We'll be keeping a very close eye on this. As the turn rolls over, we see that OCP 3.0 has officially become one of the largest coalitions in modern CBR history, with the Boers and the Inuit joining the epic fight to keep Hawaii from overtaking the rest of the globe, with its dangerous ideology, or whatever the hell it is. I, for one, do not like Boer's chances in this upcoming Ragnarok. While Boer fans were surely overjoyed with the resistance Kruger started to put up in Western and Northern Africa in the last days of the fight with Brazil, the shot of former Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa make it clear that old Paulie K has not made recarpeting his territory top priority. What's he spending all the production on? Is he building deep space probes that will spread his robotic consciousness to other cylinders across the galaxy? Has he evolved beyond this messy conflict of pigs wrestling in the mud? Here we get another look at one of the main combatants in the OCP 3.0, trademarked to user Daxington, of course, the struggle that will likely give us content for the next dozen parts. Ekanic isn't in as tough a position against the fightin' Hawaiians as Kruger is, but it will certainly be hard for his main army to join the fray with all these Blackfoot troops in their path. It may be several turns before the White Walkers can truly make their frozen mark on this epic conflict. And at last the long war is over. OCP 3.0 has ended. Crowfoot declares victory over Hawaii Day in the holy city of Hunkpapa. Korea looks on helplessly, asking why their missiles couldn't do what a bunch of guys with fabric strapped to their backs did. Hawaii was a fascinating civ, stretching its influence across the Pacific. They never occupied many cities on any mainland, but they pioneered influencing other conflicts through huge occupations of peacekeepers, and they did take Uxmal in the war against the Mayans. Ooh, that was a real long time ago. They were the long-time stewards of some of the largest cities on the cylinder due to their isolation and relatively few conflicts with the mainlanders. They're one of the few nations to survive this point without having killed an opponent, and I'd be remiss not to note that they were never in last place in the power rankings. With that philosophy, though, eventually they lost everything. Aloha, Kamehameha. F. The Kimberly were indeed successful in their assaults on Amarvati and Thaili Binai, but the gains appear to be short-lived, as the Trungs are poised to flip those cities back, as well as potentially Simhapura. The Kimberly have enough melee units in the area to contest these cities for a little while longer, but their reinforcements behind the front lines are dwindling fast, where Vietnam shows off its impressive supply chain and air force. Really, I think the Trunks are trying so hard because they're finally in a fight they can win. A lone Brazilian ex-com is barely alive in the countryside of Sumatra, while his colleagues continue to vacation in the Vietnam Corps, those Carnivalians. Is he the one that killed all the Kimberly troops around him? If so, he's clearly the Rambo of this war, behind enemy lines without the support of his government. The true reason for Brazil's declaration of war on the Kimberly becomes apparent. He's not here to snipe cities in Indonesia, he's here to add to his beachhead on the Arabian Peninsula. He didn't have to take the bad press for eliminating the Finnish nor for evicting the Afghani suburbs. Clever as ever, Pedro. A rare look at the southern Atlantic shows that Brazilian territory crosses the entire ocean. Brazilian workers scramble across to find work, as workers always do, in the Sahara. This also raises the possibility that Pedro may carpet up the ocean south of his West African holdings, providing additional assurances against the Reich. Hey, Brazilian Rambo did it! He sniped Makassar! In grudging respect for Rambo's heroism, Pedro has sent additional troops to try to hold it. It appears that in retaliation for losing a city to the world's most interesting man, the Kimmies have salted the earth in the form of nuclear devastation on what was once a core of your territory just a few turns ago. Truly, these are desperate times. But that's not the only bad news for the Kimberly. They've lost all their gains to Vietnam as well as Simhapura, and it looks like they only have one chance to even temporarily flip Simhapura back. With options running out, it looks like the didgeridoods are in didgeridoo danger. I'll show myself out. A Blackfoot paratrooper enters the royal timeshare of Kamehameha. His brethren are out on the beach taking longboards from the locals and riding some gnarly waves, but he's on a mission. He finds his target on a small table next to the living room recliner. An old copy of War Games on VHS. No cover. The scrapes from endless insertions into the VCR are visible on the sides of the cassette. Next to it, a note scrawled on a pad. "The only way to win is not to play." He pours gasoline all over the table and throws a match over his shoulder as he leaves. Who says you can't kill an idea? Any supporter of Vietnam has to be happy about the supply of troops they've been able to send down to Indonesia, but any modern civ should be watching their back door for encroaching, mucus-colored troops. While Brazil's detachment here is not yet at alarming levels yet, it would certainly behoove the Trunks to fill up their remaining empty hexes as soon as the conflict with the Kimberly is over. On the topic of open borders, this is probably the most important screen in all of international politics right now. It's incredible how nations continue to sign open border agreements with Brazil after what's happened the last few parts. The only three holdouts are the Boers, understandably, the Inuit, who have their own problems with the Blackfoot, and the Blackfoot themselves, who are aspiring to a Brazilian strategy. Everyone else seems to be hoping to ride the train of collaboration to the endgame. It's a very unbold move. We'll see how it doesn't work out for them in the end. In Korea, we see that the Blackfoot are trying to project their new number 2 military status in the same way that Brazil is, and here they're even competing for exactly the same territory. Between the two of them, it's surprising that Korea is able to have a standing military at all. They certainly weren't able to show it in OCP 3.0. It seems that even Brazilian Rambo was no match for Gundam Wing rolling back into Makassar, at least not when all organic material is falling to pieces thanks to the alpha particles zipping around. He's retreated to the countryside and started reviewing scripts for the sequel. Vietnam, meanwhile, defends Simhapura and goes deeper to take Denpasar. If he's not suing for peace yet, Jandamarra should be trying to negotiate before Vietnamese troops are off the coast of Java. Kekkonen, wherever he is, has decided to forgive Jandamarra after seeing the death and devastation wrought as vengeance in his name. Some men, it seems, just want to watch the world doot. What is this place? I've never heard of it. I mean, I know we're on a cylinder because there are Brazilian peacekeepers, but who are these dudes that are a darker shade of green? I'm being told that some people find them interesting in that they totally fought a war with Vietnam a long time ago, but it was totally epic. I don't know, I'm not buying it. It doesn't look like anything happened to me. I don't want to brag, but I've also done a little analysis here. There's a fancy new saber metric called Great Engineer to Melee Unit Ratio. Whoever these jokers are, I count 8 to 1 on that, so yeah. Cool rock, though. No, this isn't a vision into the future where everything is a uniform lime green. This is just Brazil, which, surprise, is occupied by Brazil. I guess it's true what they say. Carpet begins at home. Here we see the faux Brazil doing their best impression of that last slide. Sure, they can't quite do it because they don't occupy a land area that can totally fill the screen, but they're still doing their best darn Brazil impression they can, so don't make fun of them. Despite having a relatively low production base like Brazil several parts ago, they've biased towards carpeting units and are now second only to the Carnival itself in military manpower. Will they be able to catch up before Pedro catches on? I'm not sure that Brazil will be able to. I think that the Blackfoot are being underestimated, you should say. The Inuit need to do something quick, otherwise they're going to be overrun by a darker shade of blue. Jandamara appears to be Dunkirking, but the problem is that he hasn't owned that territory back across the channel for several millennia. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like these units, aside from what are likely nukes, would do much to help up at the front except as cannon fodder anyway. With Makassar joining the Sisterhood and Samarinda having been wiped off the face of the cylinder, the Kimberley are indeed down to their last 2 cities on the island of Java. With more Vietnam forces on the way, it's no wonder Jandamara gave the order to evacuate. The question is, will he be able to make a peace deal before he runs out of islands? Turning to the mid-Atlantic, we see a painful reminder of how insidious succumbing to the special interests that Big Carrier can be. Iceland and the Bucks have relatively well-ranked militaries by the numbers. Brazil not only dwarfs them, but has numbers that are stacked with melee units. Sure, they're mostly outdated, and this is a garbage patch that could at least conceivably do something in a war. An even rarer look at an even southern Atlantic Ocean reveals the Southern Ice Sheet Fleet. Sure, it couldn't take a city, but boy oh boy, wouldn't it be juicy to see this cutting through the embarked Brazilian units. That is, if the Ekanic knows how to attack embarked units. The Trungs are getting prime seats in the collaboration train by declaring a public friendship with Pedro. Reports are that the Trungs used to have a Statue of Liberty that they really liked to play with, but then they lost it to a neighborhood bully. Then a new kid moved in next door and he has the Statue of Liberty, so they're friends with him so they can go over to his house and see it. But I kind of think that they had their own, they just wouldn't ever talk to him. Ever wonder what the future looks like for your civilization? Well, let's take a look at a model favela of Cordoba right here in the heart of Brazil. You can look forward to a caloric intake that's severely below recommendations while you work in a leprosy cannery that supplies the warheads for biodrones. Meanwhile, your corporate overlords are all specializing in finance and reaping huge profits to be used for the endless carnival far away from where you are. Fun. In contrast to their friendship with Pedro, the Trungs are apparently very unhappy with Mr. Harry Parks of Austria. That's weird. I thought they were eliminated a long time ago. Doesn't look like anything will come of it anyway. Oh well. More importantly, a Blackfoot XCOM appears to be scouting by his old stomping grounds of Olongapo. With his new forward base of Kanaohe, could Crowfoot be looking for revenge for his lost colony? I think it's important to note that I got really excited reading this narration only to look at the screenshot and say that's a power armor infantry, not an XCOM unit, which is what you need, Crowfoot. Come on, keep teching up, boy. On the other side of the world, tensions rise in the Gulf of Mexico as nuclear warheads appear to be getting closer to Cuba. Hold on. Cognitive dissonance. Okay, back to the cylinder. The Blackfoot appear to be using Inuit territory to line up as much firepower as possible at the edge of the Buccaneer territory. The Bucky Balls also have open borders with the Walkers, so a Gulf War would certainly turn the waters red quickly. The Walkers could also give a huge advantage to one side or the other by revoking open borders. Jakarta has fallen, and given the sharp loss in population, it either flipped a couple of times or had some nuclear assistance with its overcrowding problem. The Kimberley, for the sin of eliminating a rump state, has been relegated to being a rump state themselves. With no declaration of peace in sight, we'll see how long that state of affairs lasts. Brazilian Rambo is Tom Hanks in Castaway, rated R. Using only his wits, a volleyball, and an abandoned yet fully fueled yacht in the ruins of Samarinda, he'll have to cross an ocean to get back to Brazilian Helen Hunt, only to find out she's banging Brazilian Chris Noth. Brought to you by Brazilian FedEx. Here we get a rare look at the Blackfoot Aleutian Islands, home to a modest detachment of Blackfoot troops. Those would all be in significant danger in hostilities with the Inuit, but on the other hand, they would also be excellent support for a conflict in Asia. Fighting for his very existence, Jandamara retakes Jakarta in his first gain against the Trung since the beginning of the struggle, but it looks like his hold on the city is more of a precarious last grasp as more Vietnamese troops march and sail down the coasts of Sumatra. Brazilian Tom Hanks clears the island's reef but loses his volleyball overboard. He reflects on what life and loss really means. As expected, Jakarta returns to the warm bosom of Vietnamese control post-haste. Surabaya is also suddenly surrounded by Brazilian units. Don't we all know that feeling by now? The question is, who will finish off Surabaya first? Or can Jandamara retake Jakarta with one of his advanced destroyers? Near the lands of never-ending winter, the northern Blackfoot cities appear to be focusing on increasing their production by building a space station. It's a good choice for Crowfoot. Having the world's second-place army is good, but being able to replenish it quickly in a fight is nearly as critical. Just make sure to keep your unit building bias after you're done launching things into space. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting a little suspicious about the number of slides we're seeing of the Blackfoot Inuit border. Shouldn't those two be best buds? I mean, they have open borders and they were both part of OCP 3.0. I'll never stop saying it until it's a thing. Of course, it's one thing to be part of the conspiracy to kill Caesar, but nobody likes Brutus, who strikes the killing blow. Unless you kill Caesar in the CBR, then you get cults about your exercise routines. In continuing our suspicious tour of Blackfoot lands, we see former Hawaii, packed as the Aleutians were with Blackfoot troops. I'm loving all this. Also, there appears to be a fire on Maui. Did someone press the wrong button and send Korean missiles to the wrong Hawaii? Is Civ 5 autonomously developing new features like dynamic volcano spawning? Are the occupants of the island the worst landlords ever and haven't cleaned the crap up since they last got there? Who can tell? Holy crap, Sabir and the Boers, fresh off their peace deal last part, have teamed up to give Genghis Khan the most action he's seen in a long time. This is a massive development that could reshape the balance of power in Asia, assuming the Brazilians that are absolutely everywhere along this front don't peace block the whole war. In the Northern Theater, there are only minor slap fights as the front is almost entirely blocked by terrain or gangrene. Hopefully that's not an indicator of the war to come. Further south, we can see that the defenders in the war have actually drawn first blood by taking one of the perpetual targets in the 100,000-year Sibir-Vietnam Wars, Bamda. It also appears to be fairly safely held with Brazilians clogging the mountain pass like so much mucus in my nasal passages in spring. Mongolia is on the offensive elsewhere with several hover tanks in Sibir territory, but no incursions on the Siberians on the Mongolian side. Concerningly, Sibir seems to have a much smaller army at the front and will have a hard time wading through the Sea of Green in their own territory to get new troops there. And in this slide, they're running an Air Force deficit of 27 to 59 by my count. So why did they declare this war again? Seeing a bit more of the Mongolian Corps, outdated troops may be an issue for them, but they have two things going for them. One, they actually have troops, and two, they're very close to the front because Mongolia basically is the front. It's good to see that there is a region of Sibir that's not entirely green, and it's also good to see that they are in fact capable of producing units. But gods, for just once, could you build the army before you declare war, Kuchum? These high-tech units would be perfect for carving up Mongolia if they could be anywhere near Mongolia. Also of note is how little of a backup Air Force Sibir is showing in this shot. Kuchum has a lot of factories he needs to switch on if he wants to win this thing. In a bold move of escalation in the Gulf, Henry Morgan has decided to antagonize Crowfoot, the man who has been brandishing an arsenal of nuclear weapons at the Caribbean for the last few turns. We've intercepted the captain's denunciative missive on cylinder-wide short-form social media. Missile Man Crowfoot couldn't hit Cuba if he tried. It's like surrounded by water. Big water. Ocean water. We'll see what happens. We also get a better look at Crowfoot sliding down Inuit Mexico for some potentially exciting backdoor action. An even bigger mystery than Sabir's declaration of war on Mongolia has to be Paul Kruger's motive. In the days of him holding the Indian subcontinent, he would have had the reach to influence this conflict and really try his hand at a new hobby, like a land war in Asia. But as is, it doesn't seem like he'll be able to contribute much more than IT support for the Siberians. Have you tried turning your Inuit production off and on again, or blowing in the cartridge? Meanwhile, Ani is in the black. If anyone can tell me why, I'll give them $20, but joke's on you, it's Canadian dollars, currency of a long-defunct #1 nation, so it's not worth the plastic it's printed on. The war to avenge Kekkonen seems to have come to a close with Vietnam completing their invasion of Surabaya, right under the nose of the surrounding Brazilian troops. Gendemara started as a fierce competitor in the CBR, expanding quickly and ending the ambitions of both Indonesia and the Philippines, which is a lot more than can be said of a lot of civs in the region. He left his homeland for some reason. He seemed to adopt a mostly pacifistic ideology for most of the mid-game. He was mostly left to doot in peace, but in the end, his ambition to actually do something for once led directly to his downfall. F. Un-F. Operation Didgeridoo Dunkirk is a success, with Jandy having smuggled several nukes and a giant death robot off of Java, as well as at least advanced destroyers hiding in the Great Australian Blight. He has the pieces necessary to find a new homeland or reclaim an old one like Wollongara, or is his vengeful motivation going to focus purely on the Trungs? Ulaanbaatar. There are worse pieces of border gore in the world. Hell, this isn't even border gore, it's just an exclave. But it's annoying the hell out of me for as long as it existed, and it's the main thing I want to take care of in this war. Unfortunately, Kuchum is not heeding my plea, as it seems like he's not even trying to take the city. In fact, it seems like he's on the defensive with Shenzhen under siege from a portion of UB's defensive garrison. Come on, Kuchum, you can fit a biotrooper in that East Passage. Shaoshan is in the black, and if Genghis can get his own hover tanks out of the way, he'll be able to take it with a modern armor unit and probably hold it. Otherwise, not much seems vulnerable to flipping in this front of the Khan War. The Boers haven't been in the news for at least a few slides, so we better get back to them immediately. In a confusing move, Iceland has announced Paul Kruger despite having granted Crewdog open borders. My guess is that Engelfer is a history buff and wants to recreate the epic struggle for Olympia among Carthage, Ethiopia, and Sparta circa 4000 BC. In other news, a war that you forgot was happening between Sweden and the Boers is now over. You know who didn't forget? Ani, because they've been getting the crap bombed out of them for years, and that seems to have been the only thing that happened in this war. You're now ineligible for the 20 smackers I offered several slides ago. I know you're hearing this. Sweden is now fully back at peace and is looking pretty darn good considering everyone thought they were going to be doomed based on what happened last part. Brazil now has planes stationed on the coast of the Baltic, but you know who has more? Sweden. Hey Gustavus, you definitely have the upper hand. You should totally declare war on Brazil. I'm not saying that because I'm an Iceland supporter, I'm saying it because I think it would be hilarious. Let me try to do this without destroying everyone's ears again. The Khan War continues to go swimmingly for Genghis as we see that he's now taken Shaoshan and seems to have Barnaul and Old Sorain on ice in a hover tank version of the Battle of the Bulge. If he can get a melee unit or two to the front, he'll be doing pretty well. It was a really good idea for him to declare this war when he did. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm being told that Kuchum Khan declared this war. That poor sap. In other news, Kruger isn't even providing IT support to the Siberians anymore. His brand has been associated with failure too much lately, and this war is getting to be an embarrassment. In one of the only actions the UN can take that actually could hold some interest with those on the sub, an embargo is placed on the Boers. This could be an interesting indicator on which subs are friendly or antagonistic to the Big B. Nearly everyone who's fought a Borg war recently voted for the sanctions, and of course, Sabir joined them as retribution for piecing out with Genghis so early. Interestingly, Iceland, fresh off of a denunciation, did not support the sanctions, lending more evidence to my theory that Ingilfer is actually a bearded D20. And if you look very carefully all around this slide, you can see crying Boar fans pleading to chatbot PK to build units. Any units. And here we see the real reason that Kruger pieced out. He's just in it for the money. Even though he's suffered some setbacks, the Orange's reputation is still strong enough to engender a whopping 1,383 gold per turn for him to stay out of the Khan-based festivities. Maybe Genghis was motivated to get on Kruger's good side because he thinks he'll soon share a border with him in the Middle East. Bomda, as is its nature, flips, but it doesn't look like Kuchum will have long with the city before Genghis is back in town finishing repainting the walls. Some not-so-modern armor units are also moving up in the hover tank bulge and could be threatening the usual suspects of frontline cities. Further up the front, Genghis has tenaciously held Shaoshan. They're also threatening Mandalgovi in the far north, but the Mongolian troops are clearly not getting the air support that's being sent to the southern front. Even so, with 2 giant death robots in range, Genghis might be able to take it. The downside for Genghis, not for me, is that Ulaanbaatar is in dire straits with DNA boys knocking on the door. Knowing my luck, he'll take Ulaanbaatar, but then give up Narm in a peace deal. Overall, Genghis has done a phenomenal job in the war, even as Brazilian peacekeepers have gotten partly out of the way of Siberian reinforcements. It's now that time as we take a look at the beloved Info Attic slides. Here we can take a look at the production output for each civ. Clear downticks from the Boers and Sweden as the carnival came to their respective towns, while Brazil's upturn is most clearly associated with the capture of Agra, but his continued growth suggests he's unpuppeting some of his gains. Production isn't everything, of course. The Borg have equal production to Brazil now, meaning that they could have an army like Brazil, they just choose not to. Meanwhile, the Blackfoot are low enough in this chart that I'm not sure what line they are, but they've become the standout number 2 military power. The world population leaders edge closer and closer to 1 billion citizens, a remarkable achievement after the Great Famine and some of the bloodiest wars in the CBR's history. I still don't recognize the guys on the top though. Are we sure they're in this game? I'm sure that crop yield signifies something, probably related to population. If any of the nerds want to drop a line about how it's a huge deal that Vietnam is sub 2,000, please feel free to put that in the comments and know that I will read your comment and then immediately forget about it. But I love you guys anyway. The much maligned land area statistic doesn't need any more maligning from me. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then ask your parents. But did you catch the pattern in the Info Attic slides? Did you notice that Mongolia is at the very bottom of every single one? How are you doing this, Genghis? What's that book under your pillow? Have you been reading How to Fight Wars Good, you cheeky bastard? In the Rarely Seen Religion update, we see a highly tiered distribution that's unlikely to have any changes in places for cities or followers in the long term. Mostly I'm just sad for Nestorianism. Not being the main religion in your own holy city is a tough blow, and just one more L for Kekkonen's score sheet for part 105. We also press F to pay respects for another religion. With the passing of the last exclave in Hawaii, we now live in a Rump stateless cylinder. R/Rump state, not safe for work, has been banned, and if the actions of Vietnam on the Kimberley are any indication, we may not see it reinstated for the rest of the CBR. It's a shame because Order of the Rump was one of my favorite original content comics on the sub. On the map, we see that the party pope of New Catholicism continues to reign supreme across the Eurasian supercontinent. Not Arianism with a AY spreads the master religion to all the denizens of the Americas. How appropriate that Arianism is so popular there these days. And Africa remains the prime spot for nailing lists on doors. Everyone else is competing for table scraps, a familiar feeling on this cylinder. It's been an honor for me to narrate the most exciting part for all of you creatures on the sub. It's not every part in the CBR that a major peace breaks out, 20% of the combatants are killed, and then another major war breaks out. That's another triple kill, by the way. This hasn't happened since long time ago. Many thanks are deserved for everyone who makes this thing happen every week. Please make sure to subscribe to r/Civ Battle Royale for all of the latest and greatest in OC and shit posting. And please consider adding your 2 cents to the Blue Cassette Patreon so that we aren't all freeloading on both their hard work and their cash going to hosting these parts. We'll see you next time on the Civ Battle Royale. And my name is Dawkinzz. I really appreciate you watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time.